I won't live until I die. And I work hard for my whole life. Lord, I know how hard I've tried. I won't live till I die. Oh, there's more to life than that.
Financial and production assistance for the Old Toronto series Live at the Great Hall is presented by Museum of Toronto. Museum of Toronto is a museum dedicated to showcasing diverse perspectives of Toronto's past, present, and future. Flixel Cinemagraphs. Live streaming of today's episode is brought to you by Brand Vision Media. You can find out more at brandvisionmedia.ca.
New at Canada's Wonderland, it's wet and wild racing rivers. The water slides you ride with your clothes on. Take the plunge on Pharaoh's Falls as you plummet 3 stories on a speeding water sled. Or twist and turn through the awesome tunnels of Water Snake. Hurry to participating McDonald's restaurants now for your coupon to save $4 each off the regular passport. New racing rivers. Bet you can't stay dry. Only at Canada's Wonderland, because Wonderland's the one.
Additional support for today's episode has been brought to you by the new B-Side Lounge, Little Italy's main hub for live music. It's located at 669 College Street. Hi, welcome to the Old Toronto series Live at the Great Hall. I'm your host, Morgan Cameron Ross. We're starting a new format here today. So what we're going to be doing is sitting down with a Toronto native. We're going to be talking about Toronto history and more contemporary things. Today I am talking to Galen Hogg, and we are going to be talking about Parkdale. Parkdale, an eclectic and diverse neighborhood in Toronto's West End. The area we now refer to as Parkdale originated as a 240-acre gift to James Brock in 1812. The land from Queen to the Water, from Jameson to Dufferin, was underutilized by Brock, and by the mid-1800s the area was being developed with grandiose Victorian houses, cottages, and the Parkdale railway station at Queen and Dufferin. The village of Parkdale was incorporated in 1879, with the City of Toronto annexing it in a somewhat controversial move in 1889. The Parkdale of today was a very different place than back then. The neighborhood was viewed as distant from Toronto. High Park and Parkdale were viewed as day trips and brief holidays, rather than quick streetcar or Uber rides. Hundreds of Victorian homes were built to accommodate the affluent new residents. But things in Parkdale were not always as they seemed. In October of 1894, one of Toronto's most notorious murders happened there. So I am at Lakeshore in Jameson right now, in a very scary spot. But right here, just south of the train tracks, is where Frank Westwood was murdered in 1894. It's known as one of the greatest Toronto mysteries. He was an 18-year-old man living in a mansion right here with his family. A man late at night on a Saturday came, knocked on the door. Frank opened the door, and he was shot dead with a pistol. So this was a huge, salacious murder in Toronto's history. The early part of the 20th century brought one of the largest stretches of prosperity to the neighborhood. What has to be understood is the geography of Parkdale in the early 20th century. Parkdale stretched south from Queen all the way to the water. There was no gardener at the time. From 1911 to 1922, the Toronto Harbour Commission improved the lakefront area in the Parkdale region. They added a beautiful boardwalk, sports fields, the Sunnyside Bathing Pavilion, Sunnyside Amusement Park, and Palais Royal, which was a canoe factory and dance hall. Southern Parkdale was not only a destination for Torontonians, but for tourists from all over. So from the beginning of the 20th century till about the 1950s, this area right back here was actually the most affluent and fanciest part of Parkdale. This is where tons of the mansions were. In the 1950s, when the construction of the Gardiner happened, this happened. So what they did was they tore down well over 150 houses, these beautiful Victorian houses. They also deconstructed the Sunnyside Amusement Park,
a lot of the boardwalk. So this area that was super beautiful and super affluent, and it was this great tourist destination, is now this. So with the construction of the Gardner in the 1950s, Jameson became very different. As you can see, a lot of low-rise apartment buildings. They were built quickly and still to this day have a lot of problems. They were built here because of its proximity to the highway. And this really marked a change in the demographics of Parkdale.
The addition of the Gardner and the construction of dozens of low-rise apartment buildings greatly affected the transformation of Parkdale, marking largely its departure from affluence towards more of a working-class community. What was to happen to Parkdale next can be argued to have been one of the largest effects on the neighborhood ever. The Ontario provincial government of the mid-1970s released thousands of long-term care mental illness patients from both the Queen Street West and Lakeshore psychiatric institutions. Parkdale, with its newly constructed and affordable low-rise towers, was smack dab between the hospitals and an obvious destination for the newly released patients. With plummeting housing prices, Parkdale also became a destination for the newly arrived immigrant and refugee populations. In recent years, as is the case in many Toronto neighborhoods, gentrification has engulfed the area, but Parkdale, greatly to its credit, has seemingly held on to its authentic and real nature throughout the process. Welcome back. Now, Old Toronto and the Old Toronto series is something that I started a while ago. It's a passion project. I love the city. I think people should be talking about the history of it. So for the Old Toronto Live at the Great Hall series, we're trying to do something different. So in order to make this sustainable, we have a link above right here to a GoFundMe page. I've brought in a few comrades, geeky Toronto history comrades, and what we're trying to do is make this sustainable. So if you click the link above, if you have $5, $10, $100, $1 million, every dollar that you send us, we're going to be putting right back into talking about Toronto history. Now we also have a few perks. So we're launching a Toronto historical walking series. So if you donate a certain amount, link above, we will be doing neighborhood-specific walks. We also have really cool sets of coasters that are neighborhood-specific and intersections-specific. So if you click the link right there, you are helping us out. So I'm here talking with Galen Hogg, and Galen, you've lived in Toronto your whole life. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so I grew up in Southwest Toronto when I was a young child, and then around grade 4, 5, 6, somewhere in there, my memory's not great, I moved up to Rexdale, and I was in Rexdale till high school. And after that, I did a little bit of traveling, and I've been in Parkdale ever since.
Yeah, how long have you been in Parkdale?
About 13 years.
And of the last 13 years in Parkdale, tell me how it's changed.
It's changed a lot, especially if you know, I guess where I was located, a lot of people consider that like ground zero of where Parkdale was very seedy.
You're King near Dufferin.
King and Dufferin, yeah. So it's still not the most pleasant strip to look at, but it has changed a lot. When I moved into my building, it was $700. Pretty large one-bedroom apartment, hardwood floors. You know, it sounds really glorious, but there were mice, rats, cockroaches.
Yeah.
And there was a drug problem in the building. There's a crack den across the street. And that was how my girlfriend and I at the time could afford to live.
Right.
And you know, we were starving artists, and it was a good opportunity. And because I grew up in Rexdale, it was no biggie to move into a neighborhood like that.
Right.
Now, Everything's been renovated, the neighborhood's a lot cleaner, the drug problem is still there, but it's kind of, if you ignore it, it will ignore you.
Right.
And for the most part, the pimps are gone, maybe just a couple left. It's really cleaned up. It's become a lot more of a family neighborhood. It's like, it's a very good, strong community. And the problems that we do have now, nobody's shying away from them, they've embraced them. Because basically, Parkdale is still, even though it has changed a lot, it's one of those neighborhoods that hasn't been gentrified too much, and it's still a great landing spot for refugees. We still house a lot of people with mental illness, and the community is okay with that, you know?
Right.
These people need a place to go, and yeah, Parkdale's great for that.
So, Parkdale, from an observer, started out as this kind of well-to-do place. In the 1950s, it kind of changed into a lot of apartment buildings because of the Gardner Expressway. And I think it's kind of transitioning back to being more well-to-do.
It is, it really is. And I mean, there's positives and negatives about that, right? I mean, there's been, quite recently in the mainstream media, there's been a lot of talk of what happens when, you know, say a very well-to-do family or just a couple even comes in and takes one of those big, beautiful Victorian homes that is currently housing, you know, 12 to 15 people, some of these places, kicks everybody out, guts it, and then makes a family home. And I mean, you're displacing people who need that area. So, I mean, it is nice that it's gotten safer and it's cleaning up, but I mean, there's a pro and a con to pretty much every side of this argument, I would say.
And you were telling me that recently the tenants of a lot of the buildings were bumping up against the management companies.
Yeah, in some of the bigger buildings, there'll be, I mean, I won't mention, because I think it's a few different management companies, but what they're trying to do is basically not take care of the houses, not meet the tenants' needs until they leave. They're pretty much trying to, I mean, some of these places are slums, and these are literal slumlords we're talking about here. They just want them to leave, so when they leave, they can hike up the rent. And, you know, the community's all kind of banding together, and there are rent strikes and marches and everything. It's a very serious issue because, I mean, this is our city, and it's affordable still. If you try to like push these people out, you're going to destroy what is Parkdale, basically.
And there's lots of neighborhoods in Toronto, but I've, as an observer, always thought that Parkdale has like this ethos where there's kind of loyalty within Parkdale, and I think this is such a interesting time where the gentrification is actually hitting a community that is kind of fighting back.
Yeah, there's a lot of pushback. Pretty much any little thing that happens, you can hear about it at the coffee shops or, you know, just walking down the street even. You can feel it. The community is very strong, and we interact. Like, people will walk down and, you know, see something absolutely crazy and say, oh, it's a Parkdale thing,
yeah,
to their visiting friends, and you know, we all get it. But it's the same thing with the community. When you have, you know, people threatening your community, that's a Parkdale thing too. We're all kind of sticking together and fighting against it because, I mean, I've been there for 13 years. I have no plan on leaving. I love that place.
Right. Now, Galen and I recently took a walk around Parkdale, and here it is.
This is my cozy, I'd say roomy, one-bedroom apartment in Parkdale. We call it the Parkdale Palace. Got in here when it was more of a slum. If you look outside, I don't know if you can see out there, you've got what used to be a row of crack houses. And there were drug busts there all the time. And it made my rent extremely affordable. I've got a really good super though. This place used to be a lot bummier. And upon request to get it up to code, I told them to renovate it, and they did. So now I've got a very rent-controlled, affordable space in Parkdale. Let's go to the roof.
Yeah, not supposed to have access to the roof, but years ago when they were renovating the place, I came up here and saw they were using a key and they were putting it on top of the electrical box. So I went up and snagged it, made copies for my entire building, and now you can come up here, sunbathe, have sex, shoot off fireworks, whatever you want to do. I think for a lot of people, this is like one of the last low-income neighborhoods that you can actually afford to get by in Toronto. Developers are kind of squeezing everybody else out. This is one of those neighborhoods that I think due to a lot of mental illness and drugs and prostitution, still people are really afraid to kind of get into this neighborhood. But our community kind of embraces it, I guess. We all really, we're all very comfortable with it. We know how to deal with it. There's a lot of town meetings about, what we struggle with in our community. So yeah, I don't know. It's still good. There are a lot of the developers out here though are kind of, they're trying to get into Parkdale. There's been a lot of rent hikes and strikes based on the rent hikes. Like recently we've had all the Metcap buildings. Basically people are trying to get people to leave the apartments in Parkdale so they can hike up the rent. When you bring a new tenant in, you can charge them whatever you want, right? So they're trying to squeeze everybody out, but the community's staying strong. We're sticking together and trying to fight against all that stuff. If you look down this way, you can see this is the Parkdale that we've all known, the Parkdale that I moved into. It's still pretty much untouched. You've got the apartment buildings, they've always been there. And if you look down this way, you can see the influence of the developers, the condos, Liberty Village kind of pushing its way into Parkdale. And there's really, at this point, the dividing line is Dufferin. Everything, east of Dufferin seems to be fair game at this point. Hey, how's it going? Good. A lot of it's changed. I mean, it definitely seems a little safer. When I moved here, my girlfriend at the time, I used to have to walk her and pick her up from the bus stop because the strip in between my place and the bus stop was unsavory to say the least. Now, I mean, I wouldn't say it's been developed, but it's just, I think Toronto as a whole has gotten a lot safer. And it's still a bit of a rough crowd, but crime really seems to have gone down in the neighborhood. We definitely feel the influence of the, Queen Street getting very popular. But for the most part, I think it's one of the communities that's remained kind of the same. Yeah, just a little safer.
Now, you also are a musician. How has Parkdale affected your music life or lyrics or anything like that?
It's profoundly, I'd say. It's like when I moved out of Rexdale, I moved to Montreal, and life was pretty good there. The rent was cheap, and my music kind of suffered a little bit. And then I moved to like the interior BC. I was working on the land, I had a good paycheck, I had a really nice place, I was climbing mountains every weekend. I couldn't write music to save my life. I moved back to Parkdale, you get that
struggle?
That struggle, like things are visceral there, and the lyrics, they start coming again, Right. It's like, it's hard to write about being happy, and I do try to.
I have the same thing as the songwriter. I go through a good patch in my life and I think, oh my gosh, my songs are going to be awful right now. But every breakup or something bad happens and I'm like, this is going to be awesome.
Brilliant, yeah. It's the positive side to any situation as a musician.
Definitely.
When things hit rock bottom, the one thing to look up for are the lyrics.
Fodder.
The passion. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Anyways, thank you so much for being here. This is Galen Hogg,
and this is Old Toronto Series live at the Great Hall.
Thanks for having me.
And I won't live until I die. And I work hard for my home.
Thank you for watching the Old Toronto Series live at the Great Hall. As I mentioned before, we're doing a crowdfunding campaign, so click the link above or below, and if you have any money, $5, $10, $20, $1 million, please consider giving it to us, because every dollar that you chip in allows us to have this sustain itself, because we really believe that Toronto history is important, and talking about it also is. For advertising or sponsorship inquiries, please email us, info@oldtorontoseries.com. Financial and production assistance for the Old Toronto Series live at the Great Hall is presented by Museum of Toronto. Museum of Toronto is a museum dedicated to showcasing diverse perspectives of Toronto's past, present, and future. Flixel Cinemagraphs. Live streaming of today's episode is brought to you by Brand Vision Media. You can find out more at brandvisionmedia.ca.